Hey everybody, I'm down in Southern California with the latest member of Audi's alphabet soup family. This is the all-new Audi A5. Well, this one's actually an S5. This replaces not just the A5 and S5 Sportback, but also the entire A4 lineup, because Audi has decided to consolidate things into one model. And formerly, they decided that they were going to rename all their gasoline vehicles with even numbers and all the electric vehicles with odd numbers. They threw that out the window recently as well. Don't worry, there's probably a Rosetta Stone so you can figure out the naming convention. But bottom line, we have an A5, but we're not going to get an A7. We're actually getting an A6 coming back, and the A8 is probably going to stay in A8. Anyway, let's talk about the replacement for the A4 and A5, because this is Audi's best-selling sedan and is likely going to continue to be in 2025. Now, as you'd expect, with a new number comes a bigger sedan. So versus the A4 especially, the A5 is bigger than before, longer, wider, etc. It's also much more distinctive, I think, than before, and it borrows some of the styling cues from Audi's recent electric models. Up front, we have their latest digital light pattern. If you get the top-end trims, you can actually configure these individual LED elements in this DRL signature and the turn signal light bar there. We have full LED headlights, of course. We have this big grille. If you come in close, you can see all these new grille elements. They've really gone big and bold with a touch of e-tron. So this lower portion of the grille is actually blanked out. Cooling happens above and below that. But we have these really large, you can actually stick your hand completely through those grille elements here. No fog lights or anything like that below, but they do have a radar sensor there, nice front and center. And then we also have an additional sensor there right in the middle. Now today we're taking a look at the S5, so keep that in mind as we look around. This is of course the highest performance version of the A5 currently available in the United States. At just over 190 inches long, this is now on the longer side of the compact luxury sedan segment. And I do use air quotes there, of course, because the Acura TLX, which is sort of kind of the Acura competitor to this, is definitely bigger on the outside, but it's not really any bigger on the inside. And that's always been a big reason to get this over the competition, is how big and comfortable it is on the inside. For this generation, they've moved the wheel in the back a little bit further rearward, definitely giving it less of an interaction with the rear door, and if I can open the door here, an easier entry into the back seats, because previously that wheel arch definitely impacted rear seat access. They've dramatically improved that this year. They've also given this more of a sedan-like profile, and that's kind of why Audi's calling this a sedan, not exactly a sportback, even though it still has that practical hatch design in the rear. And that's long been a reason to get this over the Audi A4, and apparently why recently the A5 has actually been selling better than the A4. At just over 22 cubic feet of storage space, one big reason to get this over the competition is that practicality. Under the floor, we have a little bit of additional storage space, but that's mainly where we find the subwoofer and the battery. But again, cargo capacity is a big deal here. And it's cargo practicality in addition to capacity, because if you had just a regular trunk lid, you wouldn't have an opening this wide. So if you're the kind of person that wants to go to Home Depot and pick up a barbecue, you could do that in this, but you couldn't do that in a C-Class or a 3 Series. Of course, there are competitive hatches out there, and in some ways, the competitive hatch to this in some manufacturers' lineup would be their smaller, sort of sportbacky SUV. And in the Audi lineup, don't worry, we're going to get one of those as well, because you can get a Q5 Sportback coming soon that is going to have a lot of the same practicality with increased ride height and a slightly taller cabin, which is why even though we get a little bit more headroom this year in the A5 and S5, it's not an enormous difference in the back, because we do have those larger SUVs in their lineup. Now, checking out the wheel game, let's take a look at this one. These are the optional wheels on this S5 model. These are the 20-inch wheels, 245/35 R20s in the back there. Up front, it is a symmetrical tire setup, so we find the exact same wheel and tire up here. I have to admit, I really like these wheels. These are actually the optional RS wheels, even though we don't yet find an RS5. Under the hood, we find two tweaked engines. The base model is going to get 268 horsepower from 2 liters and 4 cylinders, 295 pound-feet. This is the S5 model, so we have a 3-liter turbo V6 producing 362 horsepower and just over 400 pound-feet of torque. If I take off this cover, you can see the turbo right there in the valley of the engine. So this is a hot V design, single turbo right over there, not a twin turbo design like we find in some of the competition. But interestingly, this is a variable vane geometry turbo, which means faster spool up and better efficiency out on the open highway. Also improving efficiency, every engine is going to be mated to a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. No ZF automatic going on in any version of this, or interestingly also the Audi Q5. Now, dual clutch transmissions are not just about efficiency, they're of course about performance because they can simply shift faster than a traditional automatic setup. All-wheel drive is of course standard, and if we're talking about the S5 like this, the other thing that's now standard that used to be optional is a torque vectoring axle in the back. The engine is still entirely in front of the front axle, and this sometimes causes confusion among non-Audi fans, shall I say, because with the engine entirely in front of the front axle, we have more weight on the front than in a BMW or comparable Mercedes, so a little bit more than 50% of the weight on the front axle, but that doesn't mean this is front power biased like an Acura TLX or a Volvo S60. Nope, most of the power is actually going right back here to the rear wheels. And the torque vectoring axle can then send that power across the rear end. So while we do have a little bit more weight up front than in some of the competition, we have the ability to send the majority of that power to a single rear wheel. That was always optional in the Audi lineup, but they've now decided to make it standard for this model year. Moving back to the rear, Audi has always had a really great light game going on, and that continues with the OLED elements in the back. These are adjustable just like those signature LEDs up front. Now this is an optional feature, you're only going to find it in the top end trims, but check out these modules and how cool they are. These OLED modules that are configurable actually float in front of the reflector LED brake lights and turn signals. It's a really, really cool design there. You can adjust the patterns and then you have to power cycle the vehicle to run through them, but it's just a really cool little touch in the back. The turn signal in Europe is going to be down below, but because of US lighting regulations, sadly we don't get amber turn signals and we actually have this whole blinking module there. The other big change that is a definite departure for Audi is that we get quad real exhaust tips at the back. So no faux exhaust tips, no little fake things going on up there. We still have this interesting little trapezoid thing going on here, but the actual exhaust tips, that's a welcome change. Now I'm driving the S5 with the optional sport seats, so these are going to be the most aggressive as far as keeping you in place. We have a lot of adjustability here, so we have 4-way adjustable lumbar support. We also have the massage function in this seat, same function over there on the passenger seat. Powered tilt telescopic steering column, memory linked of course to the controls that I'll show you in a bit on the door. Headroom has improved up front versus the previous generation, so it's actually pretty generous in this model. We have the big panoramic moonroof up there, right there. Let's check out the back seats because that is one area where the S5 has generally done pretty well. They say they've improved legroom further in this generation, and that's certainly one reason to get this over especially some of the smaller options in this segment. I'm 6 feet tall. With that front seat adjusted for me, I still have maybe about 3 or 4 inches of legroom left there. It might be tricky if you wanted to put rear-facing child seats behind someone like me, although I could sit more upright and further forward if I wanted to make that happen. This still has very much a double bucket seat arrangement in the back, so if I'm sitting here in the middle, my head is definitely up there towards the ceiling, not exactly ideal. But if I scoot all the way over to this side, you can again see just how much headroom I have. Headroom's pretty similar to last year's model, but I don't think that was too much of a problem. We also have a 40-60 split rear seat, cup holders there, and the rear seats fold almost completely flat with the cargo area in the back. Audi gives us tri-zone automatic climate control, so separate climate for the rear. We get optional heated seats in the back, air vents here, and then optionally we also have high power USB-C charge ports, nice and high to keep you from bopping those and breaking off those USB-C connectors. As we look around the interior, keep in mind this is the S5, so obviously this is the most expensive version. It has a lot of options you won't find on the base model, but this electrochromatic moonroof is probably one of the coolest features in here. We first saw this particular technology in the Porsche Taycan. We've seen it in other cars, but not in this multi-segment format, where not only can you sort of have those alternating sections, but you can also roll it up from the bottom, roll it down from the top, etc. So you can stop it right there and allow the back passengers to see out, but block some light for the front passengers. It's a really cool touch. We have sun visors that extend, they slide to the side. We also have vanity mirrors right there. Grab handles for the driver, front passenger, and both back passengers. Height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. Fixed height head restraints in this model because again we have the optional sport seats. This also features speakers in the head restraints there for the driver and front passenger for surround sound and for navigation directions as well. We have pretty aggressive bolsters for most of the seat here, but the shoulder section is actually pretty generous. So I didn't find these seats too constricting as they can be in some of the sport competition. The seats are perforated because they're both ventilated and heated here. We have a manual extending thigh cushion and all those adjustments I mentioned before. On the driver and front passenger door, actually on all four doors I should say, we have Alcantara inserts. That's that red right there that really dresses things up. I'm a little bit concerned about how it might pill long term because Alcantara can pill kind of like a wool sweater, but we do have that comfortable touch right there on the doors. Soft touch materials in the upper section of the doors only. The entire lower section of the door, that's all a hard plastic. We find stitching up top there, the Bang & Olufsen speakers. Some of the ambient lighting strips are not illuminated, but they'd be right there just above that speaker. Then moving over to the dashboard, we find one of the controversial touches in here, which is not necessarily the passenger screen, although I'm not the biggest fan of passenger screens generally. It's the fact that if you don't get the passenger screen, here's what the dashboard is going to look like. It's going to look exactly like that, because you get this black panel, but you just don't get a screen inside it, kind of reminding everybody that you were too cheap to step up to the Prestige trims. Now, if you do step up to the Prestige trims, you can do things like streaming media, so it is a bit more useful than some. We have the Amazon Media, YouTube right there, other apps. You can actually interact with your phone right here, but you can't CarPlay here. So even though it does have that CarPlay icon, this is simply to go look through your playlists, etc. We can do the mapping or navigation, fully featured with satellite mapping, etc. It's pretty snappy to move around that, but that's basically what that passenger screen's for. Now this one is an LCD. It has a dynamic shutter inside, so that way when you're driving, watching some of those apps, the passenger can see them, but the driver can't. It would actually appear black from this angle. Over here, we have an OLED display. We then have another organic LED display right here for the main instrument cluster. The reason that we have OLED displays here is because these are pretty big. And if you've been inside something like a Chevy Blazer EV at night, you know that even though the display is black, it's going to be really bright because it has a backlight. OLED displays like this do not. So these are much more pleasing to the eye at night. They really dim down quite far. They don't give you that kind of visual interruption. We find smartphone integration there. Of course, a whole host of apps. More apps are going to be available over time in this system as well, including Yelp and AccuWeather, racing, etc. Sirius satellite radio there, regular Bluetooth phone interface, that big mapping interface right there as well. We can slide this bar from the side and see certain extra vehicle options. So for instance, if you want quick access to head-up display, things like that, lights, seats options there, the seat massage, service, things like that, all that's in there. We also have that config option over there, and then some dedicated button areas at the bottom for the climate control. But you can also voice command everything in this system with more natural voice commands than before. So you can either have the system respond to "Hey Audi," or you can just talk, or you can hit this button over here. So lots of different options to interact with that system. I'm just going to go ahead and cancel that so we can actually try and say this again. "Hey Audi, I'm cold."
I will adjust the settings to make it more comfortable.
So you can see here, it just adjusted the settings 2 degrees warmer here for the driver. If there was a front passenger in the seat, then it would be adjusting the front passenger because it knows where the person speaking is located in the vehicle. And you can ask it all sorts of questions. You can ask it to show you things, take you to certain settings pages in the systems, etc. That Alcantara trim continues across the dashboard right there. We get air vents there, USB-C interface ports, those charge and interface with the system. We also have a 15-watt charging mat there. Audi Drive Select, that's the drive mode button. You can then adjust things further in that setup there. We have a start-stop button for the engine, button to disable the start-stop system, volume and track forward-backward toggle. Lots of shiny black plastic. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I am worried about how well that will scratch over time. Joystick-style shifter here, 2 big cup holders, and then a somewhat small storage area under this armrest. It's where the key is located right there. But I really appreciate the fact that this ratchets up. So if you like a bit more of a place to rest your elbow while you're driving, this is much more comfortable than those really low slung center consoles that we find in some of the competition. Moving back over to the dashboard, we find a more simplistic LCD instrument cluster than we've had in Audis in the past. You don't really get too much of a way to change the design, but we do have a full color head-up display just above that. And then we get this Squircle style steering wheel where we have a flat top, flat bottom, and kind of squared off sides. I like the perforated leather here. I also kind of am okay with these touch buttons because these are a little bit better integrated than other vehicles' touch controls. It's actually a combination touch and physical module, so it's hard to see, but this entire module actually moves in when you click it. We then have these little bumpers to help you find out what section of that button you're actually touching. Big airbag cover right there, and then they put the cruise control controls over here on this stalk. Also, a little bit different is the location of the other buttons. So things like the headlight controls, door lock and unlock, those are over here on the driver's side door. This is where we find buttons to fold the side view mirrors. We can also adjust them, the seat memory controls, and then independent child lock buttons for each of the rear doors are there. Thank goodness we still have 4 window switches. Then over here, we find another little storage cubby right to the other side of the steering column. If you're interested in the new A5 or S5, be sure and check out my upcoming video where I can talk about how this drives. You may have noticed I haven't driven it out on the road. That's because we can't talk about that for a few weeks yet. But I can talk about pricing. This is going to start just over $50,000 and go on to just over $81,000 with all the options. This is a not quite fully loaded model, so this is under that $81,000 max MSRP. Now comes the question, is it worth it? Well, without talking about how it drives, that is a bit tricky, but you can probably connect the dots with the new generation of the DCT, of course, the torque vectoring axle in the back. That puts this in a different category than a lot of the competition, because really not all the competition even offers that kind of feature set, especially the axle in the back, even optional. Certainly not standard. Is that worth it? Let me know down there in the comment section below, and stay tuned for the drive video where we can talk a little bit more about that and a little bit more about comparisons. In the meantime, be sure and stay tuned because I'm also down here driving the new Audi Q5, and those videos are coming up soon as well. See all of you later.